Okay, did you post the link in the Slack?
Yeah, so we're live, but let me get it situated. Can you hear my family members in the background? It's probably going to be loud. Why can't I get this link? Okay, here's the link.
All the pitchers are in trouble right now.
Which ones? Paxton? Who else?
Bases loaded, no outs against Strasburg. And first and second, 2 outs in the Seattle game. And a full count on Rajai Davis.
Yeah, I see that. All right. Are you ready for some disagreement, which we usually don't have? Although I may just agree with you by the time we're done, but we'll see.
Very long at bat.
Okay. Yeah. Should we keep the viewers in suspense until Rajai Davis either gets out or doesn't get out?
No, it doesn't matter. We can just start.
Okay. We got some people tuned in already.
We have people in?
Yeah.
Where do you see how many people are in?
On the directly on the YouTube link, it shows how many are watching.
It
says 5.
Damn. Big time.
Yeah. I know.
Davis fouled off 4 pitches in a row.
We're delaying the start until Rajai Davis is done batting.
It might be a very long time. Fouled off a lot of pitches in a row.
It could be an infinite amount of time.
Could be. There's no time constraints in baseball.
Is Josh Donaldson fine? He got an RBI single. He got a double and then scored on a single. His injury issues are over.
All right. Well, Rajai Davis walked, so bases are loaded.
Oh, man. Paxton's up to 26 pitches already.
Who is that? Is that Tyler Nyquin?
Yeah, the Indians have a weird lineup today. They're hitting a bunch of lefties against.
Oh, no, it's Yonder Alonso. Never mind.
They have Yonder Alonso and Lonnie Chisenhall's in the lineup. Sort of a few lefties. And Kipnis. All
right, so let's just start.
Yep.
All right, so if anybody has any questions, just put them in the Slack chat. I guess we'll kind of run this similar to the format of how we do the podcast. So let's start with the high-end pitchers. Matt, which guy do you like to pay up for between Yu Darvish and Zach Greinke?
Well, also questions can go in the YouTube page also for people that aren't on the Slack chat. So we'll take them in either place. Well, I was sort of convinced on Darvish before we talked briefly, just before we started, and you mentioned Zach Greinke. So both are kind of strange picks. Like, there's a lot of risk with both Darvish and Greinke.
Grand slam
for whatever reason. What was that?
Alonso just hit a grand slam.
Oh man. Well, good try, Paxton. Good early slate for us. Darvish, for whatever reason, had good peripherals last year, but gave up a lot of home runs. He had some very odd games, but he was also much better in the second half of the season. I think he was, let me see, it was 10 or so Ks per 9 in the second half compared to 9 in the first half. And the walks came down in the second half too. I think the Dodgers had him make some adjustments that got him to pitch a little bit better. Greinke was throwing 85 miles per hour in spring training. So that's concerning. And I get, this is weird because I can hear myself echoing in the background from some part of my house because someone is watching us. It's very loud.
I'm bringing up Darvish's numbers for the year. Darvish was much worse in the second half of the year than the first half of the year.
Darvish was much worse in the second half in terms of ERA, but he was much better in terms of peripherals. Like, he had a very strange second half of the season where his peripherals were great and his home runs kind of just got out of control. Like, there's just a lot of weirdness with him. He's more expensive than Greinke by a decent amount, but he probably has an easier matchup. I guess the Rockies versus righties on the road is just a bad offense, but the Marlins anywhere is a bad offense. And even with the humidor nonsense, I think we can definitely agree that Miami is a better pitcher's park than Arizona, and it could be by a lot if the humidor just isn't having any effect. So easier circumstances for Darvish by a good amount, and even when he's pitching poorly, he gets a lot of strikeouts. So I think if the prices were the same, I would very strongly prefer Darvish to Greinke. With the price gap from 12,200 to 10,100, it makes them close. I don't know. I'm having a hard time kind of figuring out which guy to go with, but you're pretty sold on Greinke?
Okay, well, first off, the initial build I did anyway, right before we started, I have Greinke and Darvish in most of my lineups. It's not that hard to fit both of them in together, and I don't really like that many cheap pitchers. So Greinke's velocity was down in spring training. It's hard to say exactly how much because we don't have any like real access to any of that data. But Greinke wasn't throwing particularly hard last year anyway, and his numbers overall at home for the year. Let's see. Why can't I find the fit? Well, anyway, he had a 2.87 ERA at home. He struck out more than a hitter per inning. And then the matchup against the Rockies had an 84 WRC plus against righties, last in baseball, and they had an 82 WRC plus on the road last year. So I don't think that's a particularly hard matchup at all. And Greinke, I think, is pretty cheap compared to what his production was last year. His prices was just over 10,000. He only scored under 18 fantasy points twice at home all of last season.
Yeah, I mean, if Greinke is the same as last year, then he's my favorite pitcher on the slate. But the spring training velocity numbers and his age, I guess it's one thing if a younger pitcher just hasn't built up his arm strength early in the season. But for an older pitcher, there could clearly be a decline. Like, that definitely happens. And Greinke's not young at all. He probably is worth the shot. And I guess pairing him with Darvish makes some sense. So if we're debating Greinke, it probably has to be relative to the other pitchers in his price range. And I definitely prefer him to the other pitchers that are priced around him. Kenta Maeda might be better than him. Probably not, though. Better peripherals, but he had one of the worst hard contact rates and gave up a bunch of home runs and just had a lot of bad starts. And also the Dodgers don't let their starting pitchers generally pitch deep into games. So Greinke over Maeda, definitely Greinke over Vince Velasquez, who wasn't very good last year and is in a tough matchup. It's kind of a tough matchup for Maeda too, because the Giants got Evan Longoria and Andrew McCutchen, and they don't strike out that much. Lucas Giolito maybe is interesting, but yeah, I think the more I look at this, I probably am with you that Darvish and Greinke as a combination makes more sense than using any of the other pitchers.
Also against righties last year, the Rockies struck out 24.6% of their at-bats, the Giants 19.7%, and Greinke just strikes out a lot more guys than Maeda, so there's a lot more upside there. And I do think I just don't think a lot of people are going to roster pitchers from the Arizona game because of I think the people have gone so far on the humidor, and it's an easy thing to make fun of right now because the two Arizona games have been the highest scoring games to start the year so far. But Greinke was really good last year. So at worst, it's the same park as it was last year. So if people are going to look at Greinke and say that, oh, I don't want to roster him because Arizona's still a hitter's park. It was a hitter's park last year and he was fine.
Yeah, that's true. He pitched really well there. Someone else who's pitching in that game and also strangely pitched well in a hitter's park, Hernandez was pretty decent last season. He's only 23 years old, and he was working on some new pitches in spring training. He kind of got rocked in, I think, all of his spring training starts. He's predominantly fastball, curveball, and I think he was working in a cutter and a changeup. Forget what the new pitches are, but Marquez had better numbers in basically every regard at home last year than he did on the road. And for a pitcher that's at Coors Field, that just doesn't make any sense. But either way, his numbers overall are kind of just fine. Even, let me see those road numbers, 7.8 Ks per nine on the road, 3.2 walks per nine on the road. Not awful. And the Diamondbacks offense, well, it's probably okay. I mean, it's not that good. They lost JD Martinez, and it's really just, I mean, it's David Peralta, AJ Pollock, Paul Goldschmidt. I think Jake Lamb's probably a little overrated. So I guess the pick on Marquez kind of depends if you buy into the humidor or not. Like, I wouldn't really use him in this matchup at 6,700 in the same conditions as last year. But if we're saying that the park factors are different now, I think Marquez makes sense. And if we're looking for a third pitcher to use on this slate, I don't know if there's a better one.
So one pitcher who's cheap that I think I prefer to Marquez is Brent Suter. Suter is really cheap all the way down to 5,600. I do think the Padres offense is going to be better this year than it was last year, but they were really awful against lefties last season, and they struck out a ton. So even if the addition of like Hosmer makes them better, they're still probably going to be below average against lefties. Suter's really cheap. And if you look at his numbers last year, he was pretty solid. Bringing them up real quick. The
issue with Suter is per start. That's my big concern with him. I mean, he doesn't need to pitch that many innings to pay off the salary at 5,600, but there's very little upside for him. I guess he probably is a decent value play, but the ceiling is pretty low unless they're going to let him pitch deeper into games this year.
Yeah. So to me, it's just the price is so cheap though. Like 5,600 for a starter in a pretty solid matchup. And then last year, let's see. So basically all of his appearances came as a starter last year. He only pitched 11 innings.
8 relief appearances and 14 starts. So by innings, most of the innings were starter innings.
Yeah. So overall,
he was actually much worse as a reliever, which I guess doesn't make any sense, but his starter numbers don't look bad at all.
Yeah, overall, he had a 3.42 ERA, a 3.75 FIP, struck out a little over 7 hitters per 9. So he was not a high strikeout guy, but he was like a average to slightly above average starter in what's probably a slightly positive matchup. And just 5,600, if you roster him with Greinke or Darvish, you can fit in basically any hitter you want.
So I guess we should probably, I think for me, I probably would still go Marquez over Suter, but there's a lot of uncertainty with Suter. Like, if he doesn't have the same kinds of restrictions he had last year, then there could be a ton of upside. So that's probably a tough one too. A lot of these pitchers are just close, but I guess what it could come down to is just the lineup construction. And there's one really expensive offense in potentially a really good spot, and then a few cheaper ones that maybe are even in better spots. So I guess we should talk about the Cubs first and whoever ends up pitching for the Marlins against them.
Yeah, so I text you to make sure if you'd seen anything different than Despaigne is still starting, because Despaigne got the win for the Marlins last night. He finished the game pitched out of the bullpen. He was the scheduled starter for today's game, and it looks like he's still going to start. So that's how just shitty the Marlins are on their entire roster and how thin they are at starting pitcher, that they feel like they need to start Despaigne a game after he pitched out of the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's not starting. I've tried to find information on this. Like, it looks like he's just going to start. No one's saying anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, and
I mean, okay, no, they do have an official update that he is starting. From Team Beat Writer, from Fantasy Labs is saying it. Yeah, it seems confirmed.
So Despaigne hasn't really pitched much in any year because he's generally just doesn't do well and doesn't stick in a starting rotation. But for his career, 4.71 ERA, 4.35 FIP, 4.64 xFIP. He's a replacement level player. He pitched just like a few hours ago, and he's pitching again tonight. So amongst the high-end offenses, it's the Marlins are the top play.
Or the Cubs are the top play.
Sorry, the Cubs. Yeah, not the Marlins.
Yeah, maybe not that high on Darvish.
He's a pitcher, so use the offense.
Yeah, Despaigne definitely sucks. So the one issue with the Cubs is the park. And then the other issue is that Despaigne may just not pitch for that long. And although the Marlins have a really bad bullpen, any reliever is basically better than any bad starter. So if Despaigne just goes 3 or 4 innings because they don't want to let him throw that long because he did just pitch yesterday, then the Cubs could have a lot of, I guess, they could have a lot of platoon disadvantages if the Marlins are matching lefties and righties. Most of the Marlins relievers only pitched 1 or 2 innings yesterday. They had Darlene Garcia pitched 6 innings, and I think everyone else was 2 or less. Like Kyle Barraclough should still be available. Drew Steckenrider should still be available. The Marlins bullpen is bad overall, but at least they have some talent. And because relievers only have to throw an inning at a time, they're just better. They're more efficient than starters and just more effective on a per inning basis. So it could be a concern for the Cubs batters that maybe they only faced Despaigne at one time through the batting order. 2 at most, I would think.
Did the Cubs put out their lineup yet? I'm just gonna look because okay, here's the Cubs lineup. I was kind of curious if anybody has the day off after that game they played yesterday. I'm pretty surprised Contreras is catching again because Contreras.
Yeah, he didn't come out of the game. He played the entire extra inning game. He went into the 17th inning.
Yeah,
I think they did. They moved him out of the catcher spot at one point though. In like the 11th or 12th inning, they put Victor Caratini in, and they moved Contreras, I think, to left field. So at least he didn't have to catch the whole game.
Yeah, he's catching again today. So maybe fatigue is a little bit of a concern, but in terms of a game stack, I would be fine with them. They are pretty expensive, so if that's the situation where I'd roster Suter is for Cub stacks.
Yeah, I think I'd prefer to pay up at pitching though and move to some of these cheaper offenses that are in very strong spots. Like 2 games to me stand out in particular. The Twins-Orioles game with Kyle Gibson and Andrew Kashner. I know Gibson had a good spring, and he was good in the second half last year too. So he sort of became a trendy season-long pickup. But I can't really buy into Kyle Gibson all of a sudden being a good pitcher. Like maybe he made some improvements, but I don't see him just all of a sudden being good after being terrible for so long. But Andrew Kashner, I think we know for sure is bad. And the Twins do have some power. Brian Dozier, Miguel Sano, they have Logan Morrison now. Baltimore's a hitter's park. So I think that game, and then also looking to the team that got shut out twice in a row to start to the season. They have a pretty good matchup too.
Yeah, so Kyle Gibson for the whole last year, 5.07 ERA, 4.85 FIP. The year before, 5.07 ERA, 4.7 FIP. Steamer has him projected for a 4.55 ERA this year. I tend to think he's going to be bad again this year.
Yeah, it would be pretty miraculous if he was even above average this year. Like he could be less bad, but I think that's about as good as it's going to get for him.
Yeah, I think let's see, what are all the offenses? We have for the pricing, I prefer Minnesota and Baltimore to the Cubs. What do you think of the Royals? Just because I know Giolito, really highly regarded prospect, but he's never actually really pitched all that well.
Yeah, so this is going to be a difficult thing for teams against the White Sox this year because I think their pitchers are going to be slightly underrated. I think most of the rotation is very young. I guess it depends if Carlos Rodon is back or not. He's not pitching yet. But for Giolito, Reynaldo Lopez, the younger pitchers, I think they will just improve because they were so good in the minors. And even though Giolito was bad last year, he should be better. So I wouldn't pay 8.7K for him, but I also don't think I would necessarily stack against him. If the Royals were as cheap as they were on opening day against James Shields, then fine. But they are a little more expensive. I guess like I'd consider Duda and Moustakas around 4K each, but Merrifield at 4.4 seems a little much. But the issue that we're going to have most of the year is that the White Sox bullpen is awful. So no matter who the starter is, there's upside. Like if Giolito doesn't last long, it's a lot of very bad pitchers that are going to be in the game. So there's upside for the Royals. But also the Royals they're just awful at offense. So I think it's more of Moustakas and Duda would make some lineups for me, but I don't think I'd use anyone else.
Yeah, so I like the Royals as a cheap stat because they're not that expensive. Like I've played around with lineups. It's pretty easy to go like a 1 through 5 stack on the Royals and still roster Darvish and Greinke together. And
well, I guess before you go on, look at the price comparison for them and the Dodgers.
Yeah, well, I like the Dodgers a little bit also, but I still prefer the Royals for their pricing, mostly because of how bad the White Sox bullpen is. There was a lot of times last year that we were stacking against the White Sox almost exclusively because of their bullpen. Well, and their starting rotation was bad also. But Giolito's numbers overall in the major leagues, he does have a 3.78 ERA, but a 5.99 FIP, and he has a 22% home run to fly ball rate. And even in the minors last year, he had a 4.48 ERA, a 4.44 FIP, and had a 14.4% home run to fly ball rate. So I get that Giolito is, people think he's going to be really good or could be really good. He's basically been bad whenever he's pitched above like A ball.
Yeah, he definitely has been bad. There's certainly upside in targeting against him. I guess I just prefer the Dodgers for similar pricing. So that's maybe the only reason. Like, if the Dodgers weren't playing on this slate, then I think I would agree that the Royals are the best cheap stack. But the Dodgers are only marginally more expensive. I guess it depends what their lineup looks like. We're not going to have a Dodgers lineup before 7 o'clock because we never do. So we'll have to see what the batting order is. But I'm assuming that guys like Kike Hernandez and Matt Kemp, Logan Forsythe, Austin Barnes will probably all be in there. Maybe not Forsythe because he made 3 errors yesterday and I think struck out in all of his at-bats. Maybe they'll give him a day off. But Kemp at 3.6, Hernandez 3.3, Austin Barnes should start because Grandal got the first 2 games. Barnes is 3.1. Puig is 4.1, so he's less than Merrifield, about the same as Duda and Moustakas. The Dodgers just, I think overall their pricing for the stack could be comparable to the Royals. They're facing Derek Holland, who I know you said James Shields is the worst pitcher in baseball before opening day. I think Holland is the worst. Like, Shields could be second worst. Holland's numbers are just abysmal, and the park for the Dodgers is better. It's kind of neutral, and Kansas City is a pitcher's park. So I think with all of that, I just can't justify using a Royal stack over a Dodger stack. I mean, if you have a ton of lineups, if you got like 50 plus lineups, then sure, you could have some Dodger stacks and then just some Royal stacks also. But as a comparison, like, I don't think it's close between those two teams.
No, I think that's fair. And actually, even if we're looking at the implied run totals, the Dodgers are expected to score the second most runs on the slate behind only the Cubs. I think the other spot to really talk about is the Rockies-Arizona game, because I'm going to guess that Arizona's the highest owned team tonight.
Yeah, so let me cover the Vegas lines actually before we get into that game more specifically, because there are some decent trends for that game. The public is very heavy on Arizona, and it looks like the sharper betting is on the Rockies. They've dropped from plus 140 to plus 130. We're not seeing the same drop in the over-under that we saw with the first 2 Arizona games, and I think it's because people are just scared off the humidor. I think even the sharper bettors who just hammered the under in both of those games, it caused the total to drop by half a run to a run for both of them. I think maybe even they are questioning what effect the humidor actually will have. So I don't know, but there's clearly
just to add one thing. It's hard to just say this from the eye test, and I would have to look at what some of the exit velocities were and stuff like that. But none of the other than Charlie Blackmon destroyed a ball to center field for a home run. All of the other home runs were not well-hit balls that just carried out of the ballpark. Ian Desmond got jammed on a fastball that kind of hit off almost like his hands that somehow got out to right field. Was it Nick Ahmed maybe who hit a 2-run home run off like the end of the bat that just carried to left field, and it was not a well-hit ball at all. So I guess that also I don't really understand what it is the humidor.
Well, okay, so here's the expectation for what the humidor is supposed to do. It's not affecting the way that exit velocity translates into distance, at least as far as I understand it. So if someone happens to make good contact off the end of their bat, the ball isn't supposed to carry less. What it's supposed to do is just keep the exit velocity down. So the ball should just be hit less hard. I mean, if Robbie Ray still got hit hard, then that's kind of just normal, and Tyler Anderson gets hit pretty hard too. So I think we might just not fully understand how the conditions work there yet. It does seem it seems like nothing is different. Like, Arizona played as a hitter's park last year, but there was only 1 home run in that first game too. It was an 8-2 game, but a lot of that was just singles and doubles and a lot of walks also. I think we can both just say we don't really know what's going on yet.
No, I would say if you asked me to make a guess on what it is, it's still going to be a hitter's park, but maybe a slightly less of a hitter's park. But it was so extreme in terms of Coors Field being like the #1 hitter's park, and then Chase Field is the second most favorable hitter's park. Like, I would still say that maybe it's the top, it's like the 5th best hitter's park or something like that this year. Like, I still think that there's going to be a lot of runs scored in Arizona.
Yeah, I think so too, but I'm willing to change my mind if things start changing.
It's
either
1 game today.
Either way, the hitters are very responsive in that game. What was that?
If it's 2-1 today, then I'm just going to assume every game's low scoring the rest of the season.
Right. Yeah, we're going to succumb to a lot of recency bias here. We're doing it so far, and if there's a string of low scoring games or even just one low scoring game, I think, we'll just change our opinion. But the main reason to roster hitters in that game is because they're just priced way up, and the pitchers are at least decent. I mean, Goldschmidt at 5,000 against Marquez, and Arizona has a decent bullpen. I mean, that just seems like way too much compared to some of these other players in good spots that we've talked about. Pollock and Peralta and Jake Lamb are all in the 4,000 to 4,500 range. And then using the Rockies against Greinke just seems like a really bad idea, and they're expensive too. So if they were cheaper, maybe, but that seems like a game definitely to ignore.
Any interest in the offenses from the Milwaukee-San Diego game? I think that's kind of a weird one for me because I like Suter for his price. But it's not like I'm looking at him as some great pitcher or anything like that. And then from the other side of the game, San Diego, like Perdomo was okay at times last year, but overall his numbers were pretty shitty. And then I think it's kind of hard to make a strong opinion on how good the Brewers offense is going to be just because it's a new group of players.
Yeah, I think the issue with the Brewers for me is that they're priced about the same as the Dodgers, even a little more expensive than the Dodgers also, and they're kind of in the same neighborhood as the Twins and Orioles, and it's just not as good of a spot for them. Even though Brad Hand gave up 5 runs in the 9th inning last night, the Padres have a lot of good relievers. So Perdomo not pitching deep in the game probably hurts the Brewers a lot. And yeah, I guess their offense should be okay. Like some of their lefties might be worth using. Shaw at 4.1, Thames at 4.1. I think I'd probably be a little more interested in the righties at the top of the Padres order. Margot is only 3.2, Pirela's 3.4, Renfroe 3.2. That's a lot of home run upside for someone that cheap. So if there's anyone to use from that game, I think it's kind of just sprinkling in the righties from San Diego, but I wouldn't stack either of these teams.
Yeah, so let's I'm trying to figure out.
Also, there's Vegas line movement for the under. That's pretty significant for that game too. The total dropped from 8 to 7.5 with the public on the over. So that's one of the stronger indicators of the day. I guess I'll just briefly cover all of them. So there's line movement on the Rockies against the public. There's under movement in the Padres-Brewers game. We have, let's see, a lot of under movement. We haven't talked about this game at all yet, but a lot of under movement in the Braves-Phillies game. I think the wind is supposed to be blowing in that game. That could be why the total dropped from 9 all the way down to 8.
It's pretty insignificant, though. It's only 5-mile-per-hour winds. I'll just bring up I'm going to bring up the winds really quick just because it's kind of tied in.
Yeah.
Okay. The games where there's significant winds is wind blowing out in Baltimore and wind blowing in the Royals game. So I like the Royals offense a lot less now.
Yeah, the total for that game has dropped from 9 almost all the way down to 8. The public is towards the under, but I think that's kind of just correct that the wind would make the game less high scoring. The Twins also opened as underdogs, and they're up to -120 favorites now. They were +105 when this line came out. And the totals also dropped a little bit too. I mean, maybe sharper bettors are positively reacting to Kyle Gibson in some way, to the spring training numbers and the second half numbers. I don't know. But if I had to pick an offense from that game, I definitely prefer the Twins to the Orioles. There's a little bit of an edge for an away team always because they're guaranteed to get 9 at-bats, and the home team sometimes only gets 8. Also, the away team can score more runs potentially in extra innings where there are no walk-offs. The inning just keeps going. So there's always a little bit of reason to favor the away team to the home team. And if the away team is already favored, I guess home field advantage has been adequately accounted for. But I think it's just it's not quite as good of a matchup for the Orioles as it is for the Twins, and the line movement supports that. So I guess that would kind of change my opinion on that game a little bit. And that's probably it for the significant sharp money.
Yeah, so now that we've gone through all of the information, I think my three favorite offenses relative to price are Dodgers, Twins, Orioles. I also think the Cubs, if I'm paying up, but they're going to be a lesser owned stack for me. And then the other thing that I like is just because of the pricing on the Twins, Orioles, and Dodgers, I think we're going to be able to fit in those offenses with Darvish and Greinke if we get some cheap plugs. So I'm just looking through lineups now to find some guys that are maybe towards top batting order that are inexpensive. Do you agree with those stacks?
Yeah, I'm not I'm not quite sure about the order. Like I think I would put the Dodgers and Twins pretty far ahead of the pack. I think those would definitely be my top two. And then certainly like the Orioles and Cubs, but I think those would be the second tier picks for me. Let's see. Who else have we mentioned that I think is worth stacking? Yeah, off the Royals. Even with, well, I guess we should mention the White Sox offense a little bit against Ian Kennedy. Ian Kennedy's awful, but the White Sox offense isn't very good, and they're a lot better against lefties. So guys like Matt Davidson and Avisail Garcia, like, I'd be much more inclined to use them if another lefty was pitching against the White Sox. I don't think I'd use those guys against a righty. I don't know, Nicky Delmonico, if he was a little cheaper, maybe as a plug, but I think maybe the only guy to consider from the White Sox as a plug would be Moncada batting leadoff at 3.6. The value plays are probably those Padres guys. Like, do you see anyone outside of the ones from our main stacks that stand out as value plays? Because I think the guys that we would call value guys are in the team's lineups that we're already stacking anyway, like the Dodgers and the Twins.
So Preston Tucker's hit the ball pretty well to start the year. He's batting fifth against Vince Velasquez today. And Velasquez was very disappointing last year and did not pitch well. So I think Preston Tucker at 2,600, that's a really cheap price for him. I think he's worth plugging in. Would you agree with him?
Yeah, I mean, there aren't really any hitters below 3,000 that stand out, I think. I mean, I guess I'm still scanning to see if there's a better one, but no, I'm certainly on board with using Preston Tucker. I think he's okay and good matchup. And
Colby,
yeah, that seems fine.
Colby Rasmus is hitting sixth against Kyle Gibson today at 3,000. There's home run upside in Rasmus.
Max Kepler 3.4. I know he's down in the order, but that seems like a really strong spot against Cashner. I know we're already using the Twins, but I think it's definitely worth getting exposure to the entirety of the lineup. There, maybe not Adrianza. I don't know why he's batting sixth when they have, I guess, to split up all the lefties. The Twins have a lot of lefties in their lineup today.
Yeah, well, you can't have all the lefties and righties hitting together, so you just throw a shitty player to mix it up.
Yeah, I don't understand.
So I don't
batting order managers make no sense. Who else do we have? Scott Kingery's 2.9. He's actually cheaper than he was yesterday, and he got 2 hits in his debut. They priced him down. It's not a great matchup against Brandon McCarthy, but I think Kingery is worth considering. He also has dual position eligibility at second and third. So I guess that's probably a decent plug too. The first couple of guys we mentioned are outfielders, so there's an infielder potentially to fit in.
The other thing is there are, like, Daniel Descalso is hitting fifth against Herman Marquez today, and it's only 2,900. So I would be fine with plugging him in, even though I'm not really into the Arizona offense as a whole today, just because that's really cheap for somebody in the middle of the batting order.
Yeah, I think we're probably not going to actually need much of these players, though. Just sort of playing around with the lineups. Like, I think if you just build stacks of the non-Cubs teams that are in good spots with the expensive pitchers, you don't need to go that cheap. Maybe you do one sub 3K guy per lineup, but I don't even think it'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, I mean, the Twins aren't expensive. The only really expensive offense is the Cubs. And I think the way to make it work is you just go either Darvish or Greinke with Suter, and then it works fine.
Yeah, I just don't think I'll do that because I'm a little skeptical about Suter's workload. And I think that this spot is a little overvalued for the Cubs. I think that'll be the chalk of the slate for sure. Well, I guess they haven't played that well yet, but I think a lot of people will react to the fact that Despaigne is pitching again, but my concern would be Despaigne doesn't stay in the game for very long, and the Cubs are facing relievers most of the time. And then also the park factor there. So would you agree with that, that the Cubs are the highest owned offense on this slate, or you think you had mentioned the Diamondbacks before, you think it could be them?
I think everybody's going to go
Arizona. Well, then, I mean, I would be a little higher on Marquez then as a leverage play for GBPs. Like, I think he's a fringe play already. Arizona is going to have the highest owned offense, then there's more leverage for picking Marquez. I'd probably say he's my third favorite pitcher over Suter, but I do think it's close.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking I would still prefer just to go down to Suter just because I still think, well, I know I was going to say I think he's cheaper. I don't have to guess he's cheaper. I know he's cheaper. I can look at the pricing. For me, it's still, I mean, you save $1,000 by rostering Suter. I do think it's an easier matchup for him. So I for the price, I prefer Suter to Marquez. And even though
how would you divide up? Yeah.
Even though I think Arizona is going to be the highest owned offense, I don't think it's going to be a situation like on the early slate where every like Astros player is 30 to 40% owned. Like I don't think that Arizona is going to be that highly owned. I think it's going to be a little bit spread around.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be Arizona and the Cubs as the top two for sure, and maybe most of those core hitters are around 20%. So you're not getting that much leverage. That's true. So how do you think you would split up this pitching exposure? Like most lineups would have Greinke and then a little less Darvish, and then you'd mix in Suter into the rest of them.
Yeah, I think in like let me bring it up real quick. Also, I didn't really. This isn't like exact, and it's not what my numbers are going to end up being.
Yeah, neither of us have actually made the lineups yet.
I did an initial build just to upload lineups, and I think I had 90% Greinke, and then it was like, let's see, I think it was 90% Greinke, 70% Darvish, and then it was just kind of a spread of like some Marquez and some Suter.
Yeah, I think that's about where I would be, but I think I would try to flip Darvish and Greinke if possible. I just don't know how well that's going to work. I think Darvish is a slightly better play for his price, but I think they are both plays. One other thing for Darvish that could work in his favor is that the Cubs used a lot of relievers last night too, and maybe Darvish gets a slightly longer leash because of that. They just don't want to overwork the bullpen again, because I think Kyle Hendricks only lasted 5 innings or so in that game. So they used a lot of relievers and a lot of multi-inning appearances. So maybe Darvish gets to throw a few extra pitches because of that. But either way, it's a great matchup for him. It's a great matchup for Greinke. Ownership on Darvish and Greinke, though, I would think Darvish has to be a lot higher, right?
Yeah, I would think so. The other thing also is, so actually Hendricks went 6 innings, but then Montgomery pitched an inning, Edwards pitched an inning, Wilson pitched an inning in 2/3, then Eddie Butler pitched forever.
Right, Eddie Butler threw 7 1/3 shutout innings, I guess, until one of his inherited runners that he left scored. That was, the best game that Eddie Butler's pitched in his career.
Yeah, Eddie Butler will not be available today.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's probably a downgrade to the Cubs because Eddie Butler generally isn't very good. But, yeah, that's probably not relevant for Darvish. All right. Anything else we need to cover? Not all these lineups are out yet. We're still waiting on the Dodgers. We're still waiting on the Rockies and the Giants and the Brewers. See if more of those have popped up. But I think we can assume that Kike Hernandez will be batting somewhere in the middle of the order again against the lefty without Justin Turner there. Like, I think he has a better chance to be in the lineup than Forsythe.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up projected lineup for them right now.
We do have a Rockies lineup now, but nothing's really changed. It's just the regulars in there.
You know who hasn't played yet for the Dodgers, who I probably like because I think he's going to end up starting, is Austin Barnes. Hit lefties really, really well last year.
Yeah, he should definitely start. I see almost no way he doesn't start.
He's 3,100. I think that he's going to be a good catcher play. Kike Hernandez is only 3,300. I think that Taylor, Seager, Puig, Kike, Bellinger, Kemp, Forsythe, Austin Barnes is a projected lineup right now. And of those guys, Bellinger's 4,500. Nobody else is above 4,200. And then Barnes only 31, Forsythe 34, Kemp 36. There's a lot of cheap guys. I'm kind of interested to see how Kemp plays this year because he is in much better shape. He was really fat last year. I think he lost like 35 pounds in the offseason, which is a ridiculous amount of weight for a professional athlete to lose. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kemp was at least kind of serviceable this year, not like as shitty as he's been the last couple of years.
Yeah, Kemp has always been really good against lefties. Let me just pull up his platoon splits. I think he was very good against lefties last year, but it probably is true that he was good against lefties for mostly every year of his career. All right. Splits. Here we go.
He was kind of miserable overall. Maybe not, though.
Yeah, in recent years, he's just been bad against everyone. 71 WRC plus against lefties last year, but he did strike out way less and walk way more. He had a 269 BABIP against lefties and 333 against righties, but I guess for more power against righties. So that, yeah, reverse splits last year despite the better plate to split numbers is weird. For his career, though, we've got 146 WRC plus versus lefties, 114 versus righties. I guess most of those Matt Kemp years probably are irrelevant at this point because they're when he was much younger, but he does have a career track record of being a lot better against lefties. So maybe that returns this year also.
Standing ovation for Ichiro.
Did he do something or he's just in?
No, he's just in. It's his return to Seattle. Is this his?
He's played the other games too. I think they gave him a standing ovation on opening day also.
Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't sure if he'd played or not yet this year.
Very exciting for Ichiro.
Yep, infield single. First hit.
Oh, that's classic Ichiro.
Yeah. Although also that shouldn't have been an infield single, but he's definitely going to get the home scoring. Kipnis threw the ball like nowhere near first base, and it almost went into the stands.
Yep. Sounds like a single to me for Ichiro.
All right. No other questions. So I think that wraps it up. I don't have anything else to add for the slate.
No, I think that just about does it. No Dodgers lineup yet, so I guess stay on the lookout for that if you are. Yeah, I'm assuming whoever's watching is convinced that the Dodgers are the team to use tonight. I feel the strongest about them. As far as our schedule, I think we will probably do this one day per weekend going forward, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
Ball in the gap. Here comes Ichiro. Stayed at third.
Use those wheels, those old legs.
I like the Mariners' offense is pretty good this year. If T. Gordon's decent.
Yeah, but he usually isn't decent at hitting. He's been pretty bad at hitting, but his space running makes up for it a little bit. The rest of the hitters are really good, especially like Cruz and Cano. Seager's not bad.
And this is against Road Carrasco.
What are you saying?
This is against Road Carrasco today.
Oh yeah, Road Carrasco, way better than home Carrasco. The weirdest splits of any pitcher. It was like almost a full point ERA less for his career on the road.
I think it's even more than that.
It's in the low twos on the road, and I think it could be mid threes at home. Talk about splits for a pitcher that's already starting. That's irrelevant to everybody.
Yeah, he has a for his career. Oh, it's so much. It's even more ridiculous. He has a 3.13 ERA for his career on the road and 4.45 at home.
I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, he just threw a really good slider on the road. I would assume it has something to do with the Indians ballpark.
Yeah, it's kind of like Ryan Anderson can't shoot threes in red stadiums, right? That's the reason he's bad at home.
Yeah, it's something about color blindness.
Yeah. Maybe they should just close their eyes. All right. Should we sign off now? Anyone have questions? Doesn't look like anyone has questions.
Nobody's questions.
Got some commentary. People are upset about Paxton, but no questions.
And base hit. Ichiro scores.
He's going to regress all of his splits for his entire career in this one start.
Could be.
It's like who was a pitcher who had the home run fly ball rate luck forever, and then it all just came apart one season on the Giants.
Matt Cain.
Oh, yeah. 4%, 5%, 4%, all those low home run fly ball rates, and then he went like 21% in 1 year.
Yeah, well, it looks like Matt Moore is bad no matter what. So
yeah, he doesn't need wind. The wind isn't going to stop him from being.
There's a 20-mile-per-hour wind blowing in, and he's given up 4 runs in the first 2 and the third innings.
One thing that was sort of interesting about the wind is that it was blowing in from right, but because he's a lefty and the Astros are predominantly right-handed, that shouldn't really affect fly balls to left field too much. I guess there's only been 1 home run. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I think if you're hitting line drives in the gap, it doesn't really matter what the wind is.
Yes, wind does not do much to line drives. That is for sure. We probably overrate the wind sometimes, like the opening day White Sox and Royals.
Yeah, probably.
Get a little too excited about the wind. It certainly matters, but get a little carried away.
Let's end this.
Yeah. You can go back to watching the Mariners-Indians game by yourself, but thanks for watching, everyone who's still here, and we will be back next time, I guess.